Hey guys and girls, Bored now, back with you on this video. I will be talking about Ozark Season 4, Episode 8. The episode is called The Cousin of Death. Full spoilers from the start of this review, and of course the second half of Season 4 dropped today on Netflix, all 7 episodes, so we're on the road to the end of the show, and it gets off to a really solid start. I really got a lot out of this episode, I'll say that. It's a Ruth-centric episode, which probably makes a lot of sense considering the way the last episode, the first half of season 4, I should say, ended, really. And what this episode does is basically get inside Ruth's head through her process of thinking as she basically weighs up what to do, whether to go after Javi, whether to kill him. Obviously, she's very emotional. She's got vengeance on her mind. But I think that's why the psychology of the episode actually makes a lot of sense. That's why it being largely centered around Ruth actually makes a lot of sense, which is quite rare for this show because I think most episodes tend to bounce about between the characters, and yeah, there's very little scenes actually that then don't have Ruth or doesn't feature her, and it's sort of, I think it's a balancing act that the episode plays, because what happens is you get a few flashbacks from Ruth's past, and sometimes it can feel just like a bit of, well, let's just stick this in. It's a bit of an origin type story. We sort of get a bit more of a sense of her home life in the past, or her upbringing, and not surprisingly, that piece of shit Cage, abused her mother, or and we just see little bits of like a young Ruth like going up and laying on the roof, and her and Wyatt sort of as kids, spending the night up there, which is obviously a tradition which has continued into their adulthood. But I think it gets the right balance because it doesn't focus on those scenes too much. It's very fleeting. But I think it actually makes a lot of sense because as I said, it puts you inside Ruth's head and all the different emotions that she's feeling, and the emotions of the character are so well portrayed really by Julia Garner. Once again, she knocks this one out of the park. It's very much her episode, and obviously the birds are conflicted on it. They're trying to balance out what to do there. As I predicted, there's a dispute with them about what to do, where Wendy's she's saying she's thinking of their family first, because if Javi ends up dead, it's not good for them, and, their family could be at threat. But, as Ruth claims in one scene to Marty, is she just thinking of, the foundation? And I think that could be something that plays into the drama as the season goes on. Maybe Marty, for the first time, really question that stuff and really question, does Wendy have the family's best interest at heart? But yeah, as I said, Julia Garner is fantastic. Because the crust of the episode is that Ruth finds out about a meeting in Chicago with Javi and with Claire Shaw, which the birds are going to attend as well. And the idea of the meeting is he wants to negotiate a new sort of drug deal with her. And Ruth gets this information off Charlotte because the Marty and Wendy aren't going to give it to her. As I said, they're sort of divided, where Marty almost wants to protect Ruth in his word, while obviously thinking of their family, and he's saying, it's not a good idea, it's vengeance and all the rest. And I think he generally is looking out for her at the same time of thinking of his family, whereas it's debatable whether Wendy is doing that, if she's just thinking of herself, because she almost takes the attitude, well, if she dies, she dies, or if she screws up. But also, I think she doesn't want Ruth to kill Javi, and there's a lot of tension over that. They do a good job of like creating suspense over that, because you sort of thought, well, maybe Javi still has a big part to play in the season, but I think it's all about Ruth's state of mind as a character and selling what happened to Wyatt. And there's some nice scenes. I mean, I like the way it opens, actually. I like her and Wyatt, the flashback with them. I guess it's not too long before this, because they're talking about what they're going to do with their money. They're sort of joking about, hey, you don't know how to be rich, but they're sort of playing like this funny little game, like this music association game, where it's like, I think it's not a game I come across, but it's a game where like you have to continue like on the theme. So like if someone says like the White Album, for example, the other person has to like continue the thread with like another like album or something which has a colour in it, and it sort of goes on like that. It's this fun little game. I've not come across it, and I will say the one thing that scene does is it once again confirms the bond they have, like had sadly the sibling bond, and you see the chemistry once again with the characters. And I think just having these little scenes, these little reminders of what Wyatt meant to Ruth, just once again sells like her torment and sort of what's at stakes. And I think this show is all about stakes, all about, you know, decisions having consequences, not just for Ruth, but for the rest of the characters. So things get really, you know, heightened and tense when they go to Chicago. Another nice little touch is then for a lot of the episode, when Ruth's in the car driving, she's listening to music, like particularly rap music, and it's revealed later that it's actually music which she listened to with Wyatt, or that she listened to when Wyatt was growing up, because it's mentioned, because she actually bumps into like this famous rapper at one point, a real life like rapper, who they start talking about music and about an album which is like 20 years old. So it sort of reveals then actually the music Ruth has been listening to in the episode is like 20 years old. And that's, you know, that's the age that Wyatt was. So it's something very significant in that, and sort of captures like nostalgia. But all this build up to will she, won't she kill Javi in Chicago is like really well handled. And I think what's interesting, because obviously when she finally does kill him, she isolates him, like, because she like approaches the birds when they're having dinner with Claire Shaw, and she basically like threatens them and forces them to like take her back to Claire's office. And Claire's obviously got all these questions like, you know, what the hell's going on, because she has no idea what has gone down. And it's again all this stuff that comes out of Ruth, like, you know, do you have any idea who your business partners are? They're liars, they're killers, or all that stuff. But yeah, she actually gets like Wendy. It's actually Wendy who calls Javi in for a meeting to like set him up. And it's such a pinnacle moment, because obviously there's this suspense where they're trying to talk Ruth out of saying this isn't the way to go, there will be consequences, your life won't be the same. And obviously both birds are trying to talk her out of it, but seemingly for different reasons. But in the end, it's almost like Wendy makes that call. It's like, okay, and she does it in a very, you know, matter-of-fact Wendy type way, where she gets on the phone to Javi and like calls him over, because one of the things that he's demanded at a meeting earlier with Claire is that he wants his own stock options, although they're not for him, they're for his mother, who has a brief cameo in the episode. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, then his mother could become a big character this, second half of the season. I think maybe she could take over the role that Omar was in last half of the season, I guess. You know, he was more featured. You sort of wonder, especially with Javi being killed in this episode, if like the mother could take over a much bigger role as things go on. But yeah, it's sort of interesting because that's how they get Javi to come, saying Claire's had a rethink of the stock options, and they lure him in. So I think the point I was making is then there's an earlier scene where they have the meeting originally, where Ruth is, she's ready to do it. Javi's walking along. Ruth has a gun and walking along in a hoodie, and she just can't do it. She hesitates and freezes in the moment. And it's sort of interesting then later on, although this is a very emotional girl who maybe isn't thinking completely straight, then she actually, does think about it. She actually lures Javi in, and she actually has a plan to isolate him and kill him. Because obviously, in some ways, she did just freeze earlier, but I think another way to look at it is she was aware that it was on the street, so probably not the wisest idea to kill him in public like this. Whereas if you can get him isolated and alone, apart from the birds and Claire, obviously, and they're not going to be in any hurry to call the authorities, so it actually shows Ruth sort of smarts and her intelligence. So that's something I like, but you're sort of with Ruth for all this episode. And as I said, I think Wendy eventually has this sort of attitude where it's screw it, if you really want this, because at some point Marty mentions you can make a better choice, Ruth. You can choose something differently. And Wendy rather coldly says she knows. And so it's almost like Wendy has this sort of sense of, you made your bed, Ruth, this is your choice, and now you have to deal with the consequences. And what I quite like about that is that's almost a role reversal from Wendy to Marty. They've flipped almost, because if you go back to the start of the show, when Marty was the more kind of cold-hearted, people make their own decisions, people make their own luck, he was very much thinking that way, very much almost like a classic sort of capitalist, where you sort of, if you're successful, you're successful because you make something happen. And likewise, if you're not successful, if you fall on hard times, it's because you screw up, you make bad choices. And of course that's one of the big themes about the show. Then it's actually showing then that's not always the case. A lot of times, because of the difference in class and wealth and circumstances, people are pushed into sort of narrow, kind of awkward decisions where there's not a lot of a choice sometimes. So but it's just interesting, and it's almost like Wendy, who now has that sort of worldview, whereas I think Marty has changed his world through his experiences. But obviously, it's also really telling. Then Ruth just shoots Javi straight away. She kills him straight out. It sort of shows you her high emotions, and I think just the way she puts him down, almost very machine-like. And it's just going to be interesting seeing the fallout from this, because obviously Ruth goes back, and the stuff, I think that's hinted at, that maybe she could sort of target the birds and that, maybe she'll resent them trying to just get on with their lives, just trying to look for new places in Chicago and stuff. But obviously her just killing Javi like this really changes things. But it is all about Ruth, and it's a really strong, really solid season opener, or opener to this half of the season, and they do a great job, because as I said, this sort of thing can fall a little flat sometimes, but I think they handled the whole situation with will she kill Javi, will she not, and the circumstances around that very, very well. Another sort of interesting scene that I didn't talk about is when Javi like meets up with his ex like business professor, like business school teacher, and he mentions him earlier because he says when he was in his class he kind of looked down on him and didn't like respect him, but now things are sort of different, and they have this meeting and they're talking about making the donation, and suddenly it's almost like Javi, because he's got money and power now, the business school teacher like respects him more. And again, I think that goes to like the themes of Ozark, but once again it's all about power, the scene, because Javi like approaches him in the toilet and he makes him this proposition where you can either donate however much money it was and you can name a building after me, or I can beat the shit out of you and I'll just make it, then the donation was anonymous. And the teacher obviously, well, why would you do that? And he literally beats the shit out of him in the toilet, and it's very uncomfortable. But again, that sort of scene really goes to the heart of some of the themes of Ozark. So yeah, really good, really strong opening to this half of the season, and very interesting now to see what happens with Ruth, what happens with the birds, and all the fallout from here. So that's my review of episode 8, The Cousin of Death. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think's going to happen from here? What did you think of the episode, and what direction do you expect the rest of the season to take now with Ruth, the birds, and the cartel? Also, Claire Shaw has some questions now, because when they're sort of like starting to clean up the mess from Javi being killed, she starts asking, is that true, what she was saying? Is any of that true? So this is sort of news for her, so that's going to be interesting to see play out. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode, and I'll be back tomorrow with more Ozark Season 4. Thanks for listening, like and subscribe. See you guys again soon.